something that we didn't want to save, but we still want to quit Vim, you can do this thing. You can do from command mode, so escape :Q exclamation mark. And this will quit Vim, and the exclamation mark just means do it anyways. So if we quit, then if I cat out file.txt, those changes didn't get written to Vim. So for review, there's insert mode, which you get into by hitting the I key. So now we're in insert mode, and we can type text. There's command mode that you get into by hitting escape from insert mode. So if we're in insert mode, we hit escape, we're back in command mode. To write out file contents, you can do :W from command mode. And to quit, you can do :Q. You could also do :WQ and :Q exclamation mark. You could even do :WQ exclamation mark, which just, if there's some other issue, it'll write and quit if it can. So those are the basics. Just with those small number of things, you can get around and sort of edit files. Like you can use the arrow key, sure, that'll work. You can save files, you can add text. So that'll cover the basics, but there's a lot more that make Vim really an effective tool for doing programming and doing all kinds of other things. So there's some more stuff we can do. So if you're already in Vim, like this, if you want to load a file, you can do in command mode :O and then a file name, like wow.txt, like this, :O space wow.txt. That loads up our file. And then we can quit if we want. There's also, so we talked about QWQ. Okay, so the next big thing we can talk about is how do you move around. So Vim has some really nice ways of moving around in a file. If I open back up wow.txt, in command mode, so if you're in insert mode, hit escape, you can do these different things. So so the big ones are J and K. If you hit J, the cursor goes down. If you hit K, the cursor goes up. So J and K make the cursor go up and down from command mode. And then L goes right, and H goes left. So you can go down with J, up with K, right with L, and left with H. And these are a little bit nicer sometimes than the arrow keys because you don't have to move your right hand all the way over here. That's like this far away. It's gonna save you years of time, I'm sure. But there's a lot more ways to move around. So I guess we'll get to those in just a second. So one fun thing is if you learn these basic key bindings, they kind of show up in a lot of other places. So there's this program called less. That's the default system pager. So if you type less and then the name of a big file, like user share dict words, it's a dictionary. You could go up and down with the arrow keys, but also J and K work. This is also true on a lot of websites, like Twitter. If you use J and K, you'll go up and down between posts. This is because programmers wrote all of these, and a lot of them use Vim and think to add that to a lot of their systems. So, so these esoteric commands you'll find in more places than you might expect. You can also, I'll show you a bit more on this later. If you do set-o-vi, I don't recommend that quite yet, but you can also use all of these commands in the command line. Like I'm using J and K right now to go up and down my history. You can also hop around, all kinds of fun stuff. So here's some even fancier ways to move around. So
Wait, how do you do it with J and K? If I use J and K in my terminal,
yeah.
type J and K.
Oh, you have to type, you have to do this first and then hit escape to go into command mode, and then you'll be in like command mode on the terminal. But talk more about that later. So here's some other ways to move around. So if you want to hop to the beginning of a line, you can use 0. So say you're over here, you laboriously held down the L key all the way over here, and so our cursor is all the way to the right. If you want to jump all the way to the left, you can hit the 0 key. Or you can hit the caret. So if you hold down shift and hit 6, you'll also do the same thing. I usually hit 0 though. The opposite one of that is the $sign key. So $sign jumps to the end of the line. 0 beginning, $sign the end. Caret and $sign are also used in regular expressions to denote anchoring on the start and the end. So that's also something that like pops up in more places. It's kind of fun. Some other fun things, if you're in a really big file and you want to jump straight to the beginning, you can hit GG. And if you want to jump to the end, you can hit capital G from command mode. So if I hop into a really big file, hang on. So here's a big file. If I want to hop straight to the end of this file, capital G, and beginning, GG. That also works in less. So if you're in less for whatever reason, like the man pages by default, when you type man in a command, you can also use G and capital G to jump from the beginning and jump to the end. So 0 goes to the beginning of the line, $sign goes to the end, GG, beginning of a file, capital G, the end of the file. Okay, so now that's good for jumping around, but maybe we want to edit our files effectively. So there's some fun things you can do for editing. The simplest one is X. So if you're in command mode and you hit the letter X, it'll delete one character. So that's cool. You could do that from insert mode as well if you hit the delete key, but you can also do it straight from command mode. So if we want to delete those, we can just hit the X key. You can also delete an entire line at a time by using DD. So if you hit DD, the whole line goes away. Great. So another fun thing is, so Vim is kind of a language. So a lot of the features and commands that you use can be combined with other things. So we can, for example, combine the delete operation with D with jumping to the end of the line, which is $sign, to delete everything up to the end of the line. So if we're halfway through a line like this, our cursor's in the middle, we can do D $sign and delete everything that remains in that line. And likewise, there's a similar one for deleting up to the beginning of a line. So if you go D0, that'll delete everything from the current position to the beginning of the line. So as you might expect, you can also combine D with all of the other move commands that we've already seen. So if you want to delete everything from the current position to the beginning of an entire file, you can do D GG or D capital G to jump to delete everything from the current position to the end of the file, like that. And that likewise goes for J and K, that goes for some numbers. So if you do DJ, you delete down a line, so you delete the current line and the next one. And DK is like that, but it deletes the current line and the one before. Those are less common, but another cool one is that you can delete the next n lines by doing a number and then DD. So if you want to delete the next 4 lines, you could do 4 DD, and that deletes the next 4. So Vim is kind of this language that you can use, and it sometimes does what you might think it ought to do, or it's mostly just surprising because it's kind of consistent in this way that it doesn't seem like you might expect. At least it didn't for me. So another fun thing to do in Vim is if you need to search a big file for some text, you can use this pattern matching language called regular expressions. But the simplest case of regular expressions is just searching for a literal string. So if you have a big file, this isn't a big file, but if I go into a big file, so let's see, I'll go into pseudobot. So here I am in a big file, and say I want to search for the word eSpeak. So if I do / from command mode, and I type eSpeak, I jump straight into the file, the first occurrence of the word eSpeak. If I want to jump to the next match, I can hit the N key, In this case, there isn't one, but if I search for a common word like clients, then if I hit the N key, then I jump between the different spots in the file. And if you want to search backwards, you can just do capital N instead of lowercase n. And that also works for a question mark instead of a forward slash. Question mark just by default searches ahead instead of down in the file, so it searches up. That's searching basics. Regular expressions are really fun, and we'll have more on them later because they're actually a really powerful language for pulling out pieces of text. It's a really useful tool in text processing and all kinds of things. So what's cool is that just like everything else, we can combine certain operations like delete with regular expressions. So if we want to delete up to the first match of a regular expression, that completely works. So if you take D and we jump, say we're right here in this function and we want to delete everything up until we call that SSH command down there. So if I do D /SSH, deletes everything until the first occurrence of the word SSH. We could likewise do that for a function. There we go. Or any other pattern that we want to modify. So the fun thing is there aren't that many primitives, but if you learn them, you can use them in all kinds of novel combinations, which I think is really fun and makes them really powerful. So another really useful thing, especially if you enable set-o VI mode in your terminal, is jumping around. This is like the best thing about Vim. So on a line, you can jump the cursor to the first occurrence of a character. So this is even faster than using a regex to search for things. So for example, here I am on this line right here, client.say sudorum. If I want to jump my cursor to that hash symbol, I can hit F hash, and then I'm there. Or if I want to jump to the next quote, I can do F quote, and then I'm there. Likewise, if I want to search backwards, I can do capital F quote, and then I'm at the previous quote. Or if I want to do capital F dot, I jump backwards to the previous dot. So lowercase f will jump you forward in the current line, and capital F will jump you backward. There's also a T, which is pretty much the same thing, but it jumps to the character before a character. So if you do T dot, you'll end up in the T. Well, if you do T hash, you end up at the quote, etc. So this is sometimes useful if you want to delete up to a character, but not including that character. So if I'm at the C and I want to delete up to the single quote, but not anything before, I could do DT single quote, and I've deleted all of that text. Likewise, you can use the U key will undelete things, so if you want to do that. T also has a capital T counterpart that's the same thing but in the opposite direction. So F and T, really useful also on the command line, because if you have a big, long, hairy command, let's see, something, I guess I don't have that many big, long commands. So if you have a big, long command like this, and you want to jump to a particular character, like a W, you could just do FW and you're there. You want to delete everything, just do $. And so you can use all of these tools once you get good muscle memory in Vim in all kinds of fun places. And it's really fun because it looks like wizard spells and it's really fast and efficient. I quite like it. Okay. So, of course, D and F work with, F and T for jumping around also works in combination with delete. It also works in combination with some other modifiers that I'll be showing you in a bit. Another fun thing you can do with regular expressions is search and replace. So to do the search and replace in a file, how it works is you do :s / and then the pattern that you want to find, another / and then the replacement. So, and there's certain flags. This is taken from sed and Perl and places like that. So if we want to, let's see, if I hop back into this bot file, if I want to replace all instances of the word hash sudorum, like the channel sudorum, with something else, let's first do this on just the single line. So this exists multiple places, but if I want to change hash sudorum to hash cyberwiz, or there we go, cyberwizard. Once I do that, enter. Now that text got changed from pseudonym to CyberWizard. Cool. Now if I wanted to make that replacement global, all that I need to do is take this command and put a percent before it, like that. And when you put a percent in front of a regex like this, search and replace, then it will replace all of the instances of pseudonym. So it should replace both of those and some other ones in the file. There we go, it does. So now all of the instances of hash pseudonym have been replaced. And there's more you can do with regular expressions. Like, for example, if you want to make a case-insensitive search, then you can add I at the end of your replacement. And if you want to globally replace occurrences, so suppose that I had the word cat a bunch of times. So if you do %s cat dog, this will only actually replace the first occurrence in that line. So instead what we can do is %cat dog g, %cat dog g, and this replaces all of those occurrences globally. So just something to be aware of when using regular expressions. Great, so
James?
yeah.
When I'm doing that :s, like putting a string and then replacing it with something else, it's not working. It's telling me that string doesn't exist.
Sorry?
Every time I do the find and replace,
Yeah.
I'm getting an error 486 pattern does not exist. Am I getting something wrong?
Maybe that text string didn't exist in the file. I'll look at it later. Okay?
Okay, cool.
Okay, so another thing we can do is visual select. So if we want to select a block of text and perform operations on that block, we can hit the V key. This is a special other mode that's not command mode and that's not insert mode. It's visual mode. So if you just hit the V key, instead of insert, it says visual. So with visual mode, you can navigate around with like J and K and H and L, $, etc. to select a block of text. The blocks are based on individual characters. So usually what I do is this other slightly different mode called line select mode. That's just capital V. And this one just operates on lines alone, so you don't have to worry about ragged edges on lines. So once you've selected a block of text with visual mode, you can do things like hit D to delete that whole chunk. You can do things like X does the same thing. You can also do this fun thing called Y. So if you want to yank some text, select some lines with visual mode, like capital V from command line or from command mode, hit the Y key, and then later someplace else hit the P key, and you can sort of copy paste with Vim's own internal buffer. So you can yank and paste. But anytime you delete something with DD, it also adds that to the paste buffer. So that's also something to be aware of. Okay, cool. Another really useful thing with Vim is if you're doing programming, you'll often need to indent and unindent blocks of text. So to indent a big block of text, what we can do is say take visual mode and then hit greater than. And depending on how your editor is configured, it'll insert a certain number of spaces or tabs. You can adjust this value in your vimrc file. It's called shift width. So if you want shift width of 4, that'll be 4 spaces. If you have auto indent set, and ask me later about configuring your vimrc. It's a bit complicated, but if you do something like this, then 4 spaces, and then use the dot key to repeat that indentation if you need to indent multiple levels. Likewise, the less than key, it's like arrows pointing in each direction. So the less than moves the text to the left, and greater than moves the text to the right. Yes, dot key always repeats the last command or the last action. Yeah, so there's also another fun visual mode that you can get into with Control V. This one's pretty trippy. So with Control V, you can take a slice. It's sort of like a rectangular cutout in a file. So here we've selected just that chunk. So if we yank that chunk, well, we could delete just that chunk of text, leaving the rest alone. Or another fun thing to do, Control V and then yank that text and then go somewhere else and hit capital P, and then you paste it directly into wherever you are, which is just kind of fun. It's really good for making ASCII art, I found. The best use for that. So some fun things, you'll probably want to configure this file called your .vimrc in your home directory. How vimrc works is it's just a list of commands like you might type in command mode, but you can use this to configure Vim with a bunch of good defaults. Like for example, if you set auto indents, then this will automatically, if you're editing code and you're in a certain branch, like say here I'm in an if branch, so with auto indent set, it automatically puts me at that level. So if I insert a new line, I don't have to hit indent a bunch of times. That's really handy, I think. Another good one is called expand tab. So if you prefer spaces instead of tabs, when you hit the tab key and expand tab is set, then Vim will insert a certain number of spaces, and that number of spaces is configured with these two other parameters, tab stop and shift. So if you like, these should usually be set to the same thing, but if you like 4 spaces or like 2 spaces, you can set that up in your vimrc. So I put a link in the lecture notes to my vimrc, and I change it around sometimes, but it's a pretty good bare bones vimrc if you want to look at that. The other fun thing that I already mentioned is doing set-o vi in the command line. So you can put this in your bashrc file, and when you do that, your whole terminal just turns into one big Vim session. So here, you can type stuff like normal. By default, you're in insert mode, but as soon as you hit escape, you're in command mode. So if we want to do things like jump to the beginning of the line, we can just hit 0. Or for example, if we have like a beep, boop, whatever, if we have a command, then we can hit escape K to go up to the previous command. I can do F space to jump spaces like that, or a C, or like W also does the same thing. Or if I want to delete a character, so say I want to delete this word up to the next space, I can do DF space. There's another one called CW, which I didn't put in the notes, that does the same thing. But anyways, you can sort of skip around with T and F and regexes, and it's a super productive way to use the command line, because holding down arrow keys is really annoying, I found, in the command line. This stuff can just make you much faster. So another common customization for Vim is to remap your escape key. So by default, escape is usually all the way up there. It's like light years away on a keyboard. So it's common to remap caps lock or a similar key to escape, because if you're in Vim, then you can just move your pinky like this far instead of this far. So that's what I've done on my system. It's quite nice. Another thing you can do is you can hit Control right square bracket, and that is the same escape sequence as hitting escape. So if you need to get out of insert mode easily and you don't want to reach all the way up that far, that's also a good way. But it's kind of difficult to remember. So here is an xmodmap file if you're on Linux and want to swap your caps lock and escape. I don't know how to do it on Mac, but I'm sure it's possible. And that's the Control square right bracket thing. So that's pretty much all I have. So thanks, and if you have any questions and want to configure your vimrc, I'll be around. And also, just coming up soon, after we do a bit of open hacking, we will be editing HTML, and I encourage everyone to use that as an opportunity to practice Vim for editing HTML. So, thanks.
questions.
Sure.
So I've tried to use Vim a little bit, but gave up because I kept on it makes like backup files with like the point, the dot, like hidden files.
Yeah.
As backup things. And is there a way to configure it not to do that, or
Yes,
is it best
in
to
my
do it
vimrc, I've done exactly that because I found it really annoying. So, yeah, it's like a set no swap or something. There's a number of separate things you have to configure, but it is definitely possible.
Is it easy to get ignored?
To get ignored?
Yeah, because that's where I just don't want to deal with it. Why give up on things? Because it always get trying to commit all this. I guess I would just not.
Well, instead you just wouldn't add them.
Yeah, I guess
Git
that's
add.
the best way to do it.
Yeah. So like if you just don't do certain things, like git add
Do git
dot.
add all?
What?
I'm lazy and always do git add all.
Yeah, just don't do that.
Sounds
Yeah.
What's the program they use to do the presentations?
It's called tslide. So npm install -g tslide. Yeah. Dominic Tar wrote it. Did you stop the stream?
It said if we stop the stream, we see
That's fine.
but it didn't start to say.
Well, but it's already set up. You should have pushed another button.
But if you stop it, you have to create a whole new one.
Yeah. We want the lectures to be separate though. We don't want them to all be in a big file.